And nothing beats a trail to travel farther every day. I'd rather have lake and trees and rock than a hideaway in a southern box.
A top-loading stove in a hot tent is just a great thing. You've got a cooking ring that will boil water so fast and so reliably that we don't bring a gas stove in for cooking, because it would be an extra weight that we just don't need. In order to cook for 4 people for 8, 9, 10 days, the amount of fuel we'd have to bring in is far more than the weight of this stove. So we save weight by having a cook stove instead of a gas stove. And people are concerned often by the fact that if you cut a hole in the top of your stove, it's going to smoke out your tent, right? Well, look at this. I've opened it up completely, and there's no smoke coming in the tent, much less actually having the stove ring on or a pot. Once you get a flow of smoke going up the chimney, you've got momentum, you've got draw, and air is being sucked into all these little cracks and crevices around the stove, because it's not an airtight, it's just a box. And so the flow is into the stove, not into the tent. That's making sure, of course, that you have dry firewood, and that your chimney, in this case it's only 3-inch stovepipe, is clear, not all blocked up with soot. And that happens about every 3 or 4 days. You got to take the pipes apart and then run a spruce branch through them as a big pipe cleaner. But anyway, to manage this stove, and here we are sort of halfway between breakfast and lunch on this day, you close the draft so the coals can't come out when you take the lid off, stick it somewhere, and then you take a stick of any kind, and you roll all the coals in there up against the door. Get kind of a slope, kind of a ramp. This is the best way to rejuvenate the stove when it's getting down. And then you take your wood, again from the top, lay it in there. Ooh, that's a dry piece. That would certainly spark up the fire, but I don't want that right now. I'm going to go outside. So I'll lay a couple of larger logs in there. Put a little space between them. Better burning. Now we're starting to get just a touch of smoke, but not very much. Coming out the hole. Put the lid back on. And then if you wanted to fire it up immediately, get it going, you open that up. And the air flowing hard through there and then through all those coals works like a blacksmith's forge. It's like a forced air. And it'll light up those logs and get them producing heat very, very quickly. Now, we've already got all the boiled water that we want. But if I wanted to boil water quickly, and I can, when I say quickly, I mean just as fast or faster, just as fast or faster than my stove in my kitchen at home, I take my middle-sized pot and I immerse it right in the hole. So the flames are spreading all around the pot. And the heat exchange is so fast, you can boil a liter of water in about 5 minutes, maybe even less. It's hard to measure. But when you start operating these stoves, you're always going, oh, boiling again, boiling again. Very, very effective, very efficient. And this lid is just a disc with a bunch of rivet tails sticking through. I guess you can see that. So I'm going to set it on it. They're spaced correctly and it nestles into place and can't get back sideways off the stove. So that's the unit. And we've got it set on a couple of cross pieces. These are the top of the green pole that became our ridge pole up above the tent that's holding the whole thing up. So there's 2 of these, right? You can see here, there, and the one in the back. And then I've got these little sheet metal spacers. They just lay in place. They're not screwed or anything like that. And that prevents, and they're held up off the wood, again, by some rivet tails. But it holds the stove about a 1/4 inch up off these green branches, and it won't burn through, period. And then it's wired into place, up, over, and down. So it's really quick, really simple to set up. I'm going to add some voiceover here. You may be wondering why we don't use stove legs. And the reason is we're 4 feet above the ground. With this setup, we camp on the snow. We don't have to dig it out. And that is extremely liberating. We can set this tent up just about anywhere, and we don't care if the ground is particularly level or if it's covered with logs or rocks. It's also lighter this way, and we have to haul every pound on sleds. You can just wire it to these sticks, and for a quick overnight, like on our first camp on this trip, you just put one other stick under there to hold up this end. And then use the tie bar here to stop a melt through, and that's fine for a night or two. But for a longer camp, which is what we have in mind here right now, I've got this barrier log in place, and that sticks out the sides, about 18 inches out both sides of the tent. You would never want a sewn-in floor in a wall tent. Very bad idea. I mean, why would you want a sewn-in floor? Gosh, there's no bugs. And I don't know if you can see this or not. I just flattened the end with an axe saw cut, and then an axe move, and then put a nail through each of these. So we've got a really solid rig for the stove. People can trip against it, no problem. It's not going to fall down. And we've got a good solid barrier between the working area, which is dug down, I don't know, 20 inches here, maybe a little more, from the sleeping area and the living space back there, which last night slept 4 people, and this is only an 8x10. When you dig down like this, you get a cold well, so the coldest air in the tent sinks down there. And then you got full standing headroom. In fact, I can only just barely reach the interior ridgepole where we've got everything hung up and drying. So there's tons of headroom in here, and I can work on the stove or work on the, get everything we need out of the grub box. And the hinged lid of the grub box functions as a table. And I can do all this without even really bending over. It's just a good working height. So that's how we work this thing on hot tent camps.
The axe rings and the tree falls. The dead wood frames tent walls. The stove pops and the heat spreads, and it warms hands and it bakes